The New Orleans Saints went out this offseason and got the right guy to bring their offense into the modern day of the NFL. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at how Klint Kubiak, New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator, is uniquely positioned to bring the New Orleans Saints into the modern day of NFL offenses and turn forward the hands of time. We'll go over what it is that we want to see from this offense and Klint Kubiak during training camp. We'll also take a look at how this new offense must complement quarterback Derek Carr. And we're going to kick everything off with just what is it about Klint Kubiak that made him the right hire to help bring the New Orleans Saints offense into the modern era of NFL offenses. We got all that and more coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much. As always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Even with playoffs having dwindled down, there's still so much to check out over at FanDuel with the MLB heating up and the WNBA more popular than ever. And right now, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the New Orleans Saints went out and made a hire this offseason, bringing in Klint Kubiak as their new offensive coordinator, and in doing so, made the right decision. So what is it that made him the right decision? Well, let's take a look. So look, one of the biggest conversations that you're going to see all offseason long and really all season long, and probably have already heard a ton of, is when it comes down to motion and play action. Now, we've discussed this ad nauseum here on the Locked On Saints podcast, but we have a lot of new listeners right now as training camp gets closer and closer. So welcome to everybody that's new to the show. And of course, to all of those of you who have been tuning in forever, who have been everydayers. I want to make sure that I go back over some of this stuff. So it's going to feel like a little bit of a review, a little bit, but I want to kind of give some new information and everything as well. So the thing about motion, play action, why they are important and how they'll be instituted are going to be the two biggest things. So let's focus on why they're important first. It makes both of those things, motion, play action, they make offense easier for those that are executing it. Does a lot of stuff for you. It gives you pre-snap diagnosis when you utilize motion, the idea of whether or not a defense is in man or in zone, gives you a little bit more breathing room when it comes to play action, especially when it's complemented by a very good run game, which is what this Klint Kubiak wide zone offense is all going to be predicated on, is the outside zone run, which then gives you more different styles of play action. There's your standard drop back play action. There's your outside play action, which you can then accompany with rollouts, boot actions, waggles. There's so much that you can do with all of those different devices that are included. So we talk about like boot actions and rollouts. We're talking about the quarterback faking the handoff and running one way or another to kind of help move the pocket. When we talk about waggles, we're talking about multiple play actions to multiple players, things like that. So just gives you a little bit more creativity. What we also know is that play action as well as motion both boost wide receiver production. We'll dig into a couple of those numbers here in a little bit. And then it also increases creativity, increases disguise in a way that doesn't overcomplicate your offense. So couple that with kind of narrowing down or easing the complications of the play calls, which we're seeing them kind of shorten play calls and things like that. So couple those two things, and the simplicity matches the complexity, which is really, really helpful. When you can do things simple on your side, but make it feel complex for the defense over on the other side, that's a way to win football games on the offensive side of the football. Now, let's go back a little bit. Now that we've kind of hit why these things are all important, let's discuss kind of how we know that Klint Kubiak is going to bring some of these deals. So let's start with motion, first of all, which we mentioned gives you a little bit of help with the pre-snap diagnosis. Also creates a little bit of that window dressing, eye candy, kind of challenge the eye discipline of the defense. Where are they looking? Think about like a magician who wants you to kind of misdirect, right? I want you to look over here while I'm doing this over here. Ooh, look, a pin, whatever it might be. That's my magic trick for you there, by the way. It's not actual magic. I had the pin in my hand the whole time. So the deal with the pre-snap motion is that you actually have two ways to do this. Either your receiver or whoever is going in motion gets set before you snap the ball. That's considered motion. Or you have motion at the snap, which means a player is still in motion when the ball is snapped. Each of those creates its own level of complexity, level of complication, level of challenge for opposing defenses, level of wrinkle for you to introduce as an offense. So when we take a look at what Klint Kubiak has done in the past and what the New Orleans Saints did last year or didn't do last year, it becomes really, really clear just how much the New Orleans Saints using motion can benefit them. Last year, the New Orleans Saints were 31st in total motion. That includes motion at the snap as well as motion that gets settled before the ball is snapped. Back in 2021, when the Minnesota Vikings offense was play called by now New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak, they were 15th in the NFL. So not top 10, not top 5, but a far venture from where the New Orleans Saints were last season. And so if the Saints improve from using motion, total motion, the 31st rate in the NFL to the middle of the road rate, that is still half a league better than they were before. And what we know in terms of boosting wide receiver production in particular, thanks to our friends over at Underdog Fantasy, the expectation is that about 10% increase can be expected when it comes to yards per route run when motion is involved. So just a greater efficiency when it comes to that on a per route run basis, number of routes that they actually run. Similarly, over on the play action side, we saw the New Orleans Saints use play action only 16% of their snaps when it came to play action attempts versus their standard attempts. So not the number of times that play action was called, but the number that play action was actually executed into a passing attempt, 16% of the time. In 2021, with Klint Kubiak and the Minnesota Vikings, it was 20% of the time. Again, not a huge leap, but still a leap that increases that per route run productivity for wide receivers. 20%, according to our friends over Underdog Fantasy. So a plus 20% yard per route run boost when it comes to wide receivers when play action is involved. So no matter what, if you're looking at what the New Orleans Saints were most recently versus who Klint Kubiak was years ago as a play caller, before having spent time with Kyle Shanahan last year, who, by the way, when it came to motion, the San Francisco 49ers were number 2 in the NFL last year, not number 15, number 2. So you figure where Klint Kubiak already was versus what he has now experienced during his time with the San Francisco 49ers. All of that comes together to say that the New Orleans Saints will use more motion, will use more play action in 2024. Each of those things bringing the New Orleans Saints closer and closer to the modern day era of the NFL. Couple of other things, zone run offense. We mentioned the outside runs. That is a big thing that this offense will be predicated on. A little bit more modern in terms of the offense as well. And a committee run game, which we've seen Gary Kubiak, Klint Kubiak's dad, use for years and years and years as an offensive play caller himself. So those things for me are enough to say, okay, easily Klint Kubiak was the right choice in terms of updating and upgrading this New Orleans Saints offense. Coming up next, let's talk about how that new offense must complement quarterback Derek Carr. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where you can make every moment more. Playoffs in the NHL as well as in the NBA, of course, are all wrapped up now, but that doesn't mean that there's still not a lot of fun to be had over at FanDuel.com, especially right now, because all summer long, you've got FanDuel giving boost and bonuses to all customers daily. That's right. Every single person, for everyone, every day is getting a little something extra, a little bit of lagniappe all summer long. And it's a great time to get involved. Right now, Angel Reese has broken the WNBA record for most consecutive games with a double-double with 13. Will she go 14 games, 15 games, 16 games, 17 or more games? You can bet on that over at FanDuel. 17 plus games, a $5 bet would win you $19.50. Definitely worth getting in on if you ask me. So head over to FanDuel.com to start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, family. In order for the New Orleans Saints offense to be truly successful in 2024, it's going to have to complement quarterback Derek Carr, as well as, of course, his top shelf weapons. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to also go and check out Locked On Sports Today. I'm hosting all week. Come and show a brother some love as we check everything out from all the biggest stories around the world of sports. The Red Sox on fire right now, looking fabulous. Of course, the tragic news with the Minnesota Vikings. Luke Braun over at Locked On Vikings did a phenomenal job paying tribute and telling the story that matters most around Kyrie Jackson. And we take a look at LeBron James doing the Lakers a little bit of a favor. And of course, this isn't in the episode, but I will mention it. DeJounte Murray thanked Atlanta before Anthony Davis thanked New Orleans. We're going to keep it going. All right, so as we continue on here on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I want to dive into how Klint Kubiak's new offense must complement Derek Carr. So we highlighted all of the things that we think this new offense is going to include and why they're important, how we believe they help, just based upon what we've seen across other NFL teams, right? Will it work for the New Orleans Saints? We don't know. We won't know that until we see it. But we've seen these elements get introduced to offenses all around the rest of the NFL. Think of the most explosive offenses in the league: San Francisco, Miami. You can throw Detroit in there. You have to throw Houston in there now. Los Angeles, the Rams in particular. All of them use these principles, right? The committee run game is pretty popular amongst all of them. Maybe the Christian McCaffrey effect changed that, of course, in San Francisco. But we saw the committee CMC work just fine for San Francisco as well. Motion, play action, the utilization of different plays out of the same look. Los Angeles Rams. These are all principles that the New Orleans Saints are starting to adopt. And so in order for them to be effective, they have to be executed well, which means that they have to be able to complement quarterback Derek Carr. So how are some of the things that we're seeing this offense already start to implement working with Derek Carr so far? Well, I will say so far, so good. Now, we'll see what happens when it gets in. But one of the things that I want to mention is the idea of running different plays out of the same look. So we mentioned the simplified play calls, right? Shorter play calls, shorter verbiage, all these other things, and how that can help an offense. Helps you get a little bit more comfortable, get you in and out of the huddle more quickly, less. This is going to sound so stupid the way that I'm going to say this, but I'm trying to say it the most basic way possible. The fewer words, the fewer things there are to be confused about. I know that sounds super basic, but it's just kind of the truth. The other piece of it too is when it comes to those same looks play in and play out, I would expect the New Orleans Saints to use a lot more two wide receiver sets, whether those include two tight ends or two running backs / a running back and a fullback, whichever one that might be. I would certainly expect to see more two wide receiver sets, and that's going to go to complement guys like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. It makes them the focus of the offensive passing game with the threat of pass-catching running backs, pass-catching fullbacks, Taysom Hill, pass-catching tight ends, all these other things. So I think that is something that also helps Derek Carr while also helping the receivers. It helps Derek Carr because everything is simplified. Everything is understood by the offense. Everything is on the same page, even though the defense doesn't know necessarily what's coming because, again, you're running different plays out of the same look. So you're getting into a routine and a rhythm as an offense, but you know what you're doing and you know the curveballs that you're throwing because you're scaffolding, right? You're building to something. We'll run this in this look, then we'll run this in the same look, then we'll run this in the same look, which should open us up to be able to do this in that same look because this will all be influenced by the fact that we did this, this, and this in that same look. You get what I'm saying? So it all ends up building to something or sequencing to something, which was something that we were wanting to see or that we're waiting to see if Klint Kubiak has improved on here in New Orleans over what he did during his time in Minnesota. So if he has indeed improved there, then that is inherently complementary to what it is that Derek Carr and these receivers are wanting to do and how they're wanting to do it. The next thing is going to be advancing the run game. So while Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed get the benefit from being the focus of the passing game when it comes to wide receiver, on the field more, not coming off the field inexplicably in big moments, having more plays and shots designed and drawn up for them, making them a greater threat in not only the short and deep areas, but also the intermediate areas and attacking the middle of the field, all of that. You're also going to look at this offense, be able to expand by improving on its run game. This is big for the New Orleans Saints, who were near the bottom third of the NFL, or really in the bottom third of the NFL last year when it came to rushing yards, I believe 22nd in the NFL. They would like to see themselves get back into the top 10. This New Orleans Saints offense has been at its best since 2006 when it has a top flight run game to pair with its top flight passing game because, shocker, the two feed into one another. So being able to get that back for New Orleans would be huge. Getting Alvin Kamara back in the building, ready to go, extension done and everything like that would go a long way. But of course, the development of Kendre Miller has to be factored into that. Smarter usage of Jamal Williams has to be factored into that. And then where do some of these other guys get to contribute if they get the opportunity to contribute? Jordan Mims, James Robinson. These are guys that have also gotten the opportunities before to operate within these outside zone run offenses and have done well in those schemes. Kendre Miller is going to be learning something a little new here, but already looks to be adjusting to it pretty well. So if you get the run game going, that sets up and takes a little bit of pressure off of your quarterback, takes a little bit of pressure off of your passing game. When the pressure comes off the passing game, it allows them to be able to operate more freely and allows them to be able to take advantage of better game situations. If your run game's not working, you're going to see a lot of 2nd and 10s. You're going to see a lot of 3rd and longs, and you've got to be able to minimize those types of game situations as best as possible. You want to win on 1st down. You want to win on 2nd down to give yourself manageable 3rd down opportunities. And that's where having an advanced run game, or advancing, i.e. improving offensive run game, is going to help you big time because it helps make the other stuff a little bit more manageable. The other thing that I will mention as well is, of course, that usage of motion and play action. We mentioned, of course, that would be something that we'll continue to talk about, continue to hear about all offseason because it's quintessential. It's very, very important. So the motion, allowing you to be able to do your pre-snap diagnosis, something Derek Carr has always been very good at. And Derek Carr, very, very comfortable in play action, was very comfortable in play action when the Saints started to actually utilize it in the kind of different ways, more higher variety of ways last year. And we're already starting to see all of those different things already incorporated in this year's offense. Continuing to focus on improving the red zone, Derek Carr was one of the lowest players one of the quarterbacks that threw the lowest uncatchable pass percentage in the red zone. So in other words, he threw amongst the most accurate passes in the red zone last year. That was a spot where the Saints really, really worked towards the end of the season to get better. See how they are able to continue that here this year. Being efficient in the red zone means putting points on the board, and that's something that the New Orleans Saints need to be able to do earlier in games. The red zone will help you do that. And then finally, being able to develop better 3rd and long game plans, even if it does mean getting back to screens on 3rd and long. Listen, if the screen pass on 3rd and long works once every 4 times instead of once every 20 times, you'll take it. If the screen pass works, and that doesn't necessarily mean picking up the 1st down right away on 3rd and long, but certainly gives you an opportunity to maybe consider where you are field position wise on a 4th and 2 or a 4th and 1, give you an actual option there, or improving the opportunities from a 4th and 7 from the 30, as well as instead of a 4th and 2 from the 35, where your punter maybe has a little bit more breathing room. You'll take all of that as well. So I think that too, having sort of a more basis or a stronger foundation of what you're doing on offense otherwise gives you the opportunity to develop better 3rd and long game plans because you're able to see fewer of those. And therefore, what you want to do on those can vary a little bit more because you're not seeing them as often. So I think all of those things end up complementing Derek Carr complimenting Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Alvin Kamara, Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill, Foster Moreau, everybody that's a part of this offense going into 2024. So in order for us to really start to believe that those things are going to take place, let's discuss next what we need to see in training camp for it to be proved. We've got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula to bringing home and winning championships. It's also the formula for keeping your ride or die alive. So over at eBay Motors, you're going to be able to find everything that you need to be able to maintain your vehicle and level your number one ride or die up to peak performance. Whether you're looking for superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, exhaust kits, whatever it is that you desire, you're going to be able to find it over at ebaymotors.com. They've got you covered with over 122 parts and accessories for your number one ride or die. You're going to be able to find exactly what you're looking for every single time. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit the first time, every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And of course, over at eBay Motors, you're going to find all the parts that you want at the prices that you need. So go ahead and bring your MVP up to that MVP level performance. And of course, bring home those huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay guarantee fit available only to U.S. customers. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints are gonna have to show some things in training camp before a lot of fans are going to be comfortable getting excited about what they might see in 2024. Not to say that fans shouldn't be excited now. If you're already excited, good. But there's a large contingency of fans out there that just want to be proven. They need something proven first. And I think that's okay. So let's highlight some of the things that I think the New Orleans Saints would be better off proving during training camp. I got three things in particular that might end up kind of further comforting some of the fans that right now are still kind of cautiously optimistic, which is completely understandable. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here and for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we are your team every day. So coming up in tomorrow's episode, we're going to take a look at what a successful season for Derek Carr in 2024 looks like. So I want to get your thoughts early on this. What does a successful season for Derek Carr look like? I'm talking stat line wise, not necessarily win-loss record-wise. I don't think wins and losses are quarterback stats. So more so taking a look at, like, what would you want to see from Derek Carr to call it a successful season? I'm going to come with my stat line as well as what some folks are expecting that stat line to look like in 2024. But right now, let's focus on what we want to see from the New Orleans Saints in training camp. By the way, when it comes to training camp in Irvine, it does not look like at this time the New Orleans Saints are set to have fans present for any of their practices. However, they will have two practices open once they return here to New Orleans after their preseason game against the San Francisco 49ers, one at Ullman Stadium in Uptown, of course, where Tulane football plays, and then the other at the Caesars Superdome. So we'll continue to keep you up to date with all that. I'll try to remind you all those good things, but hopefully maybe we end up seeing something happen when it comes to Irvine. But even though they're not going to have any open practices, John Hendricks and myself, or even if they don't have those open practices, John Hendricks and myself are looking at creating some fan experiences on our own around Second and Saints, Locked On Saints as well, with a couple of the Saints bars in the area. So just keep an eye and an ear out for that. I'll keep you up to date on all of it. All right, so three things that we want to see from the New Orleans Saints during training camp that would prove that the New Orleans Saints are on the right track. The first of which is continued focus on motion and play action. The second of which is a winning offensive line, and the third of which is Derek Carr looking comfortable. So let's start with number one here, because again, we're focusing on motion and play action. These two things are the cornerstones of modern offenses. All right, different types of motion, where the motion is being utilized. Orbit motion, which is when you're kind of like orbiting around the backfield. The cheat motion or the speed motion, where somebody starts in the slot but then motions to the outside, and the ball is snapped while they get to moving full speed, gives them a little bit of a head start. We saw the Miami Dolphins really kind of create that trend last year that swept the entire NFL, except for in New Orleans. Expect to see that in New Orleans. In fact, we've already seen it during training camp. We've already seen it during OTAs and minicamp. We'll see about it during training camp. But we want to just see a continued focus on this. it was wild to me. And John Hendricks, too, when we were talking all about this, my colleague over at Second and Saints, as well as over at Saints News Network, where we were discussing like almost every play that the Saints ran during OTAs, and then especially during the mandatory mini camps, included motion of some kind. There was just a ton of motion utilized all throughout those practices. So we just want to see that continue during training camp. And then, of course, continue to see the focus on play action as well, because Derek Carr is just a really good play action quarterback. Play action is a modern thing in the NFL. It's proven to be productive. As we mentioned earlier, play action, according to Underdog Fantasy, creates a plus 20% boost in yards per route run of production for wide receivers in the league. Use it. Utilize it. So just seeing a continued focus there. So far, so good in terms of what we have seen. Just want to see it continue. I mentioned a winning offensive line. Boy, I can't wait to see padded practices and joint practices in preseason. Don't get me wrong, but at least in the padded practices, seeing the offensive line win some of those reps. You're not going to win every rep. In fact, you don't want them to win every rep. You want them to be challenged by the defensive line that's in front of them. So they need to lose some reps here and there as well. It's got to be even back and forth, all this other stuff. And that could mean that one practice, it's the offensive line that wins it. The next practice is a defensive line that wins it. Or it can be a rotation of snaps. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Just want to see the offensive line look good during those padded practices. I think that would be huge for this New Orleans Saints offense. We know that they've been able to move. They've moved. They've had fun. It's been nice. It's been great. Now, when it comes to training camp and we get the opportunity to see the physicality really tick up, John Benton, New Orleans Saints' new offensive line coach, spoke a little bit with John Hendricks about how much those padded practices are going to matter. We're going to see it even get further with the San Francisco 49ers in the joint practices. However, that's only a pair of practices, so how much are you really going to see during that? But the preseason, all this other stuff, I just want to see these guys and the starting offensive line of Taliesin Fuanga on the at left tackle, whoever's going to be at left guard. I believe it's going to be Nick Saldiveri, Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard, and then we believe Trevor Penning at right tackle. Just win when it comes to those padded practices. Not that we're not seeing them win now, or that we didn't see them win during OTAs and minicamp. It's just that it's so hard to gauge when no one's really hitting each other. But those padded practices introduce a whole new level of physicality, a real opportunity to be able to see that. So really, it's about watching the offensive line win during those padded practices and win considerably. Climb up to the second level, get after some linebackers, get after some secondary players, win at the line of scrimmage, reset the line of scrimmage, move those defensive linemen back on their heels, all of those things. Those are the things that you want to see from this offensive line during the padded practices of training camp. And then finally, I mentioned Derek Carr comfortably operating the system. We saw two examples of Derek Carr being really, really comfortable in the system. The first of which was on a simulated end of half drive where he marched the offense down, scored a touchdown, and ended up, setting them up to kind of take a lead in the getting them into a situation where they were taking a lead at the end of a first half. The other one was when we saw them take a long drive down the field in a simulated end of game situation, scoring a touchdown and winning the game with I believe it was a 2-point conversion on that one. Those were practice reps, not game reps. But if you want to do it in games, you got to be able to do it in practice. And the fact that they were able to do that so cleanly in practice with a brand new system, Derek Carr is like 98th offensive coordinator, all these other things. Not really, but he's had a lot of offensive coordinators. I'm working on a piece on that over at Saints News Network that'll come out here soon. He's been through a lot of play callers, a lot of offensive coordinators. So the fact that they were already at that place where they were able to orchestrate what they were doing against a defense that has been effectively doing what works since 2017 and very comfortable at doing all that and maintained a lot of their talent going into 2024, that was pretty good to see. Just want to see a continued comfort in operating that offense throughout training camp. We'll see how much of it that we get to see during preseason, but I will say one drive during the preseason is not going to be enough. Want to see it during training camp and then see it during the regular season as well. So for me, it's all about that continued focus on motion, play action, the run game and the offensive line winning in that run game during those padded practices, which includes the running backs producing, feeling right, hitting the holes, having the vision, all those other things as well. And then, of course, Derek Carr operating the system, I think, are three big things that we want to see from the New Orleans Saints in training camp in 2024. All right, y'all. Remember, tomorrow, we'll look at what a successful season looks like for Derek Carr in 2024. Don't forget to send me what you think that successful season looks like. In the meanwhile, we appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, should the New Orleans Saints trade or keep Brandon Ingram, Locked On Pelicans, Jake Madison has you covered, and LSU football recruiting continues to be on fire. Matt Moscona has got you up to date with all that over at Locked On LSU. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you. We're going to take a look at what a successful season